17 insane Prohibition facts. Hey everyone, it's Alexa and welcome back to another video. What do you think you know about Prohibition? Speakeasies, flappers, and Chicago gangsters might come to mind, but there's so much more to find out. But before we get into today's video, make sure that you're subscribed and ring the bell so that you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Gave birth to NASCAR. One of the biggest sports in the South came about due to the criminalization of alcohol distribution. It seems like back in the day, some of the good old boys didn't quite want to give up the moonshine and started participating in a bit of bootlegging. To evade the police, they began to soup up their stock cars to make them as fast and maneuverable as possible. Think Dukes of Hazzard. In their downtime, these bootleggers started to race each other for fun, and voila, NASCAR was born. When the clock struck 12, alcohol became illegal in the United States at the stroke of midnight on January 17, 1920. To enforce the 18th Amendment's prohibition of the production and sale of alcohol, the 66th United States Congress also passed the Volstead Act, formerly known as the National Prohibition Act or the Valentine Act. This act served to explain what counts as breaking the law when it came to alcohol. For instance, the Volstead Act explicitly prohibits intoxicating beverages, since officials thought the line intoxicating liquors in the 18th Amendment was confusing. The Volstead Act also stated less alcohol consumed ensures that there would be more alcohol left over for other purposes such as research and fuel, dye, and other quote-unquote lawful industries. What were the rules? When people in the present day think about Prohibition, they probably imagine what the movies show: a crowd at a speakeasy, underground manufacturing of liquor, and people sneaking shipments of bottles between here and Canada. All of that is true. However, even though the law stated it was illegal to sell, manufacture, transport, or import alcohol, technically that means you can drink it. The public dubbed those who supported the constitutional ban as the Dries, who saw Prohibition as a step in the right direction, morally speaking. Temperance and the suffrage movement. The Women's Christian Temperance Union was instrumental in passing Prohibition. Temperance paved the way for the suffrage movement, women's right to vote. Their success to ban the sale of alcohol encouraged members of the group, such as Elizabeth Stanton and Frances Willard, to branch out and become activists for other causes, like women's suffrage movement. Many historians believe that women's suffrage would have taken much longer to achieve had they not had the experience of banding together behind a political cause, the way we did for Prohibition. Then came Dr. Seuss. At first, it may startle you to hear that Dr. Seuss is somehow related to Prohibition. Dr. Seuss's real name is Theodore Seuss Geisel. He came up with the iconic pen name during his time at the University of Dartmouth. The school banned him from working in any extracurricular activities after he and his friends were caught drinking alcohol. The punishment meant Dartmouth forced him to quit writing for the university's humor magazine. He didn't do that, however, and instead adopted the pen name Dr. Seuss so he could keep writing for the magazine without people knowing who he was. The Walgreens powerhouse. Much like those addicted to prescription drugs today, one of the bigger loopholes during Prohibition was in Section 6 of the Volstead Act. You could legally purchase alcohol if you had a note from your doctor. Then all you'd have to do is go to the pharmacy to fill your prescription. Guess who has a bunch of convenience stores with a pharmacy inside? That's right, Charles Walgreen did. Some may attribute the success of the business to sound business decisions Walgreens made during the 20s, but we think there's another reason why his business exploded from 20 stores to 525 stores during Prohibition. Eventually, Walgreens would become the biggest pharmacy chain in the United States. Rewriting the Bible. You might remember a section of the Bible that mentions Jesus turning water into wine. During Prohibition, you might have found it difficult to find this passage because many people tried to erase any mention of alcohol in the Bible. Many temperance activists and Dry supporters believed alcohol was a poison to the body as well as a sin. You might remember that one Bible story that involves Jesus making wine for, everyone. That posed a problem. So, temperance activists hired a scholar to rewrite the Bible and remove any references to alcohol. One excerpt in the book of Timothy stated to use a little wine for thy stomach's sake. To turn the phrase on its head, temperance writers convinced people this meant you needed to rub alcohol on your abdomen if you felt a stomach ache. So many speakeasies. Ever wonder why those secret nightclubs during Prohibition were called speakeasies? The term dates back to the 1800s and derives from British slang for smuggler houses called speak softly shop. In America, people needed to whisper the code for admittance as they would stand outside a locked door, another reason that the term stuck around. These nightclubs sold alcohol illegally, but on the surface, they claimed they sold coffee and soft drinks. We doubt anyone really believed that. The clubs also included live bands and lots of dancing. At the height of Prohibition, the number of speakeasy clubs in Chicago was over 7,000, while New York had almost 100,000. By the end of Prohibition in 1933, those thousands of speakeasies virtually disappeared. Home brewers and winemakers. Thanks to Prohibition, more people learned how to make homemade alcohol. The era gave birth to home brewers and winemakers. Lawful citizens felt stuck between a rock and a hard place. They didn't want to break the law, but they didn't want to do without booze either. Similarly, previously lawful wine and beer companies faced needing to reinvent themselves or go out of business. Someone in the alcohol industry discovered the perfect way to fulfill the needs of both while still keeping to the letter of the law. People began selling wine bricks and malt extract that could very easily turn into wine and beer. The products even included a handy set of instructions that explained how to do it. Al Capone's wallet. He earned the nickname Scarface long before Hollywood made that Al Pacino movie. Al Capone rose in the gang world during the Prohibition era and served as one of the founders of the Chicago Outfit, the Italian-American organized crime syndicate. In just 1927 alone, Capone made over $60 million. He achieved this only 2 years after he first became a boss for an organization that handled illegal breweries. At the time, Capone wasn't even 30 years old. He started working as a bouncer at the age of 20 after moving to Chicago from New York. He did lots of illegal things, but the public regarded him as more of a celebrity than a criminal. The rise of the KKK. Yes, the same group that brought us racially motivated crimes also brought us Prohibition. The Klan felt that most drinkers were Catholics, or immigrants, or Irish, or worse, a combination of the three. Members of the KKK thought that robbing these groups of their drinks was an excellent way to punish those groups. Even before Prohibition, the Klan pushed for these reforms, often by aligning themselves with more mainstream political organizations. Once Prohibition took effect, the Klan served as a vigilante enforcement arm, taking justice into their own hands. Thankfully, both Prohibition and the Klan's rise were relatively short-lived. Thus, jazz arrived. Can you imagine going out drinking with friends with no music playing at some point in the night? In addition to seeking out some booze on the weekend, people also wanted entertainment and the socialization they missed from meeting friends at the bar. As it turns out, people found that they could fulfill all these needs at any of the thousands of speakeasies that sprang up during Prohibition. Jazz was the go-to source of entertainment at these clubs. The clubs allowed many jazz musicians to make business connections that helped them further their careers. Not all of these contacts were beneficial, however, as many of these connections involved organized crime. It all backfired. The more we learn about this moment in U.S. history, the more most of us can agree that the aim of Prohibition backfired. The Dries that supported Prohibition did so because they saw alcohol as evil. They considered the enactment a noble experiment, but in reality, it gave rise to both good and bad things, some of which still exist today. The government banned alcohol in the hopes of reducing crime and corruption, as well as reducing the tax burden from prisons and poorhouses. They also believed it would somehow improve the country and the health and hygiene department. In the end, it made even more crime and corruption, and it cost more to try and stop all that crime. The candy industry. Well, now that we've talked about the bad, what were some of the good things that Prohibition created? Banning alcohol turned out to help the candy industry boom. For people addicted to alcohol, the sudden lack of it led them to look elsewhere to feed an addiction. Many simply replaced one vice with another, in this case, candy. Candy, long time considered a women and children's treat, started to gain new customers: men. Booze to cruise. Modern cruise lines drew their inspiration from booze cruises. Here's another loophole that existed during Prohibition. You could drink alcohol if you boated far enough offshore into international waters, where local laws didn't apply. A few enterprising businessmen chartered boats and took their rich clientele on so-called booze cruises. Historians believe that these sorts of cruises led to the creation and popularity of modern-day cruises, and some countries in Europe still engage in booze cruises because people love to buy duty-free alcohol. Otherwise, you pay a pretty high tax. Prohibition's still here. Remnants of Prohibition still exist today. Even after the passing of the 21st Amendment, which finally made it entirely legal for companies to manufacture and sell alcohol for public consumption again, many states, especially those in the Bible Belt, enacted local laws to prohibit alcohol. These mini-prohibition laws continued as late as 1966, when Mississippi finally came to their senses and stopped enforcing statewide prohibition. While all 50 states are now on board, there are still 200 dry counties in the U.S. that completely prohibit the sale of alcohol within their borders. Hold on, before we get to number 1, we have something to ask you. If you lived during the Prohibition era, what do you think you would have done? Would you have been a temperance activist, a dry supporter, raced stock cars for fun, ran a speakeasy? Let us know in the comments below. The experiment. The government went above and beyond to enforce the law. Here's one conspiracy theory that is true. Many people during Prohibition thought the rules were ridiculous and did whatever they could to circumnavigate the law via loopholes or buy directly from the black market. To get their supply, the black market peddlers would often steal alcohol meant for industrial purposes. Back then, it was safe to drink because industrial alcohol didn't have a lot of the dangerous additives that are present today. That is, until the government introduced them. That's right, to crack down on illegal drinking, the government added toxic compounds to the beverages. Many people passed as soon as this experiment began. Some historians estimate that as many as 10,000 people passed as a result of these actions. As a direct result, organized crime took off, and many people have not trusted the government since.